Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving into something really fascinating, the world of sound. We're going to be exploring these specific tones called solfeggio frequencies. Now, people who are into this stuff claim they can do incredible things, from easing your pain to, get this, actually repairing your DNA.
I know, it's a huge claim, right? It just makes you stop and think, can a simple sound wave, something you just listen to, really have that deep of a physical effect on our bodies? Well, that's the big mystery we're going to try and unravel today.
So here's our game plan. We'll start with where this whole idea of healing sounds comes from. Then we'll get into what solfeggio frequencies actually are. After that, we'll check out the amazing benefits people talk about, look at the science and the skepticism, and finally, we'll talk about whether you should just listen for yourself.
First up, the promise of healing sounds. And you should know, this is not some new age trend that just popped up on TikTok. No, this idea has some seriously deep historical roots. I mean, for centuries, cultures all over the world have believed in the power of sound. Just think about those mesmerizing Gregorian chants you might have heard, or the sacred Sanskrit chants from ancient India. These weren't just for show or for worship. There was a real belief that the specific tones they were using could have a huge effect on a person's mind, body, and even their spirit.
Okay, so what are these special sounds? That brings us to the main event, the solfeggio frequencies, and what some people call the sacred scale.
So put simply, solfeggio frequencies are just a specific set of musical tones. The story is, they were pretty much lost to history for a long time, but then they popped back up in the 1970s. This was thanks to a physician, Dr. Joseph Puleo, who said he rediscovered them by finding these repeating mathematical patterns in the Bible's book of Numbers. Pretty wild, right?
Now, to really get why this is such a big deal, you gotta understand a little debate happening in the music world. Almost all the music you listen to today is tuned to a standard of 440 hertz. It just makes everything consistent for musicians everywhere. But the folks who believe in sound healing, they argue for a different standard, 432 hertz. They believe it's more in sync with the natural vibrations of the Earth itself, something they call the Schumann resonance, which is kind of like the planet's own background hum. So what are these frequencies supposed to actually do? Well, this is where it gets really interesting. The benefits that are linked to them are honestly pretty extraordinary. We're talking everything from just feeling less stressed out all the way to repairing your DNA. So each frequency on the scale is said to have its own special job. For example, 174 hertz is linked with pain relief. You've got 396 hertz, which is supposed to help you let go of guilt and fear. 639 hertz is for making your relationships better. And then, right in the middle of it all, you have the most famous one, 528 hertz, the so-called miracle tone. Yeah, this one, 528 hertz, gets all the attention. People call it the frequency of love. And it's the one that's claimed to have the power to create transformation and even repair DNA. It's really the cornerstone for a lot of the biggest healing claims you hear about. Which, of course, brings us to the million-dollar question. Is there any real evidence for any of this? So let's take a look at the science, the personal stories, and of course, the healthy dose of skepticism that surrounds this whole topic.
Okay, so one of the early studies that supporters always point to is from a biochemist named Dr. Glenn Rain. Back in 1988, he took vials of DNA and exposed them to different kinds of music. And he found that the ancient Gregorian and Sanskrit chants, the ones that use these kinds of tones, actually increased the DNA's ability to absorb UV light. Now, why does that matter? Well, that increased absorption is a known sign of healthy, well-functioning DNA.
And it's not just old studies. More recent ones have started popping up. An Italian study found that music at 432 hertz actually slowed people's heart rate compared to the standard 440 hertz. A Japanese study in 2018 found that music at 528 hertz significantly lowered stress markers after just 5 minutes of listening. And another study, this is crazy, found that same frequency reduced the toxic effects of alcohol on cells and made them live about 20% longer. But beyond all the lab coats and test tubes, a lot of the belief in these frequencies really comes down to personal experience. A blogger named Lauren Sikorsky decided to just put it to the test herself. She did a week-long experiment where she listened to nothing but solfeggio frequencies. And her experience was pretty amazing. On day 1, she felt her thoughts start to calm down. By day 4, she was feeling more balanced and her spirits were up. But day 6, that was the real game changer. After listening to 417 hertz, she said she instantly felt a huge weight off my shoulders. By the time the week was over, she was totally convinced they worked for her. However,
we gotta be fair here. The wider scientific community is, well, they're pretty skeptical. Like this Reddit user, Unmissed, points out a lot of the controlled studies on these kinds of sound therapies find that the effect is tiny, basically no more helpful than just listening to plain old white noise.
And that skepticism brings up a huge question. How much of the good stuff people feel is because of the placebo effect? This is a really well-documented thing where just by believing a treatment will work, you can actually see real, measurable improvements, even if the treatment itself doesn't do anything. It's a super powerful force, and you can't ignore it in any conversation about healing.
Which leads us to our final section. You've got this conflicting info, right? Some cool new science on one side, but a lot of skepticism and the placebo effect on the other. So how are we supposed to make sense of all of this?
What's the final verdict here? Are we talking about some ancient healing wisdom that's been rediscovered? Or is it just a lot of wishful thinking because we all want easy solutions to our problems?
The truth seems to be somewhere in a messy middle. Yeah, there are some studies showing real positive effects on things like stress and heart rate, and personal stories. They can be incredibly powerful. But mainstream science just isn't sold on it yet. And you absolutely cannot ignore the power of your own mind through the placebo effect. So for a lot of people, it just boils down to their own personal experience.
And you know what? Maybe that's the real takeaway here. Like one person said, direct experience is the best teacher. Whether the good feeling comes from the frequency itself, or just from taking a few minutes to relax and focus, or because you believe it will help, maybe the most important question isn't, does it work? But instead, does it work for you? It kind of leaves you wondering, in this search for well-being, where does the science stop? And where does our own belief take over?